guys, welcome back to the channel. You're in for a wild one today. I've got a story that's gonna make your skin crawl. Straight from some random dude's nightmare in an old creepy house. This isn't your typical ghost story, it's raw, it's real, and it's got that what the hell just happened vibe that'll stick with you. Before we dive in, do me a solid, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, smack that like button, and ring the bell so you don't miss any of these spooky drops. Seriously? You don't want to sleep on this one? Alright, let's get into it. Picture this: a quiet suburb, an old house with creaky floors, and a night that went from normal to straight up terrifying. Here we go. I'll never forget that second night alone with Megan in our parents' old house. It was just me and her, stuck in this creaky suburban relic in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, while Mom and Dad were off at some boring conference. The place was ancient wood floors that groaned with every step, windows that rattled when the wind picked up, and this constant draft that made it feel like someone was breathing down your neck. That first night, we laughed off the weird noises, chalking it up to the house being old as hell. Megan even joked about ghosts, but I told her to quit being dramatic. We were fine, just two dumb teens watching TV and eating junk food. But by the second night, everything changed, and I still can't explain what happened. I'm typing this now because I need someone out there to hear it. Maybe someone knows what the hell went down. It started simple, but it got bad fast. Here's how it went. It was around 8 p.m. and Megan was in the kitchen, boiling water for some cheap pasta. I was sprawled out on the couch, half watching some dumb reality show, when I heard her scream, like a real scream, sharp and panicked. I bolted up and ran in there, heart pounding, thinking she'd burned herself or something. But she was just standing there, pressed against the counter, her face white as a sheet. She was staring at the window above the sink, the one that looks out into the backyard. I asked her what was wrong, and she could barely get the words out. She said she saw a guy out there, a man, just standing in the dark, staring at her. And not just any guy, she swore he was covered in blood, like it was smeared all over his shirt and face. I thought she was messing with me at first, but the way her hands were shaking, no way she was faking that. I tried to calm Megan down, but honestly, I was freaked out too. I grabbed a flashlight from the junk drawer and went to the window, shining it out into the backyard. Nothing, just the overgrown shrubs swaying in the wind, and the dim glow from the neighbor's porch light way off in the distance. No bloody guy, no footprints, no nothing. I told her maybe it was a shadow, or her imagination playing tricks. Old houses like ours are creepy enough to mess with your head. She didn't buy it though. She kept saying she saw him, clear as day, just standing there watching her. I didn't want to admit it, but the way the house felt that night, like it was holding its breath, made my skin crawl. We pulled the blinds down tight, finished cooking the pasta in silence, and ate maybe 3 bites each before giving up. The whole time, I kept glancing at the window, half expecting to see some bloody face pressed against the glass. We locked every door and window after that, double-checking like paranoid idiots, but it didn't make us feel any safer. We tried to shake it off and go to bed, but sleep wasn't happening. I crashed in my room upstairs, the one with the slanted ceiling, and that one loose floorboard that always creaks when you step on it. Megan's room was down the hall, and I could hear her tossing and turning through the thin walls. Around 3 a.m., I was still wide awake, scrolling on my phone under the covers, when it started the knocking. It wasn't some polite tap. It was loud, aggressive, like someone was slamming their fists against the front door downstairs. Boom, boom, boom. It echoed through the whole house, rattling the old wooden frame. I froze, my heart slamming in my chest, just listening to it go on and on. I kept waiting for it to stop, but it didn't. It just got more desperate, like whoever was out there needed to get in now. I wanted to check, but my legs wouldn't move. All I could think was, is this the guy Megan saw? I don't know how long that knocking lasted, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10, but it felt like forever. Every bang made my stomach twist tighter, and I just lay there, clutching my phone like it could save me. I could hear Megan whimpering from her room, this quiet little sound that made me feel like the worst brother ever for not going to her. Then, just like that, it stopped. Dead silence. Not even the usual creaks from the house, just this heavy, suffocating quiet that was somehow worse than the noise. I waited, holding my breath, expecting it to start again, or for something to crash through the door. Nothing happened. I kept telling myself it was just some drunk guy or a prank. But deep down, I knew that didn't add up. Who knocks like that at 3 a.m. in the middle of nowhere and then just leaves? I didn't sleep a wink after that. and I'm pretty sure Megan didn't either. We were both too scared to even text each other about it. Morning came slow, gray light creeping through the curtains, and I finally dragged myself out of bed. Megan was already downstairs, sitting on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her like a cocoon. She looked wrecked pale, bags under her eyes, still shaking a little. We didn't talk much, just kinda stared at each other, knowing we'd both heard it. I couldn't sit still though. I had to do something. So I grabbed the trash bag from the kitchen anything to get my mind off it and headed outside. The air was cold, damp, and the yard looked normal enough. Wet grass, those stupid overgrown shrubs, the little vegetable garden Mom was so proud of. I was halfway to the bins when I saw something lying in the grass near the garden. At first I thought it was a pile of clothes or maybe a dead animal. Then I got closer and my stomach dropped. It was a guy, face down, not moving, and his shirt soaked in dark red blood. I just stood there for a second, staring at this guy, my brain refusing to catch up. The trash bag slipped out of my hand and hit the ground with a wet thud, but I barely noticed. He wasn't moving, not a twitch, not a breath, and that blood on his shirt was real, dark and sticky looking, spreading out from his back like he'd been stabbed or shot. His face was turned away, pressed into the grass, so I couldn't see who he was, but something about him felt off. The way he was just lying there, so still, in our yard, it didn't make sense. My hands started shaking, and I yelled out, "Hey, you okay?" No answer. I took a step closer, my sneakers sinking into the damp dirt, and that's when I realized he wasn't hurt, he was dead. My chest tightened up so bad I could hardly breathe. All I could think was, is this the guy from the window? Did he come back? I stumbled back to the house, tripping over my own feet, and burst through the door yelling for Megan. She came running, still wrapped in that blanket, and when she saw my face, she started freaking out before I even said anything. I told her there was a dead guy outside, yeah. I just blurted it out, like that, and she went dead quiet, her eyes huge. I grabbed my phone and called 911, my voice all shaky as I tried to explain. There's a body in our yard. He's covered in blood. I don't know who he is. The operator kept asking questions. Did I touch him? Did I hear anything but I could barely think straight? Megan just sat there on the floor, hugging her knees, muttering about the guy she saw at the window. I kept glancing out the kitchen window while we waited for the cops, half expecting that body to get up and walk away. It didn't. It just stayed there, ruining everything. The cops showed up maybe 20 minutes later, 2 cars, lights flashing, pulling into our driveway like it was some crime scene out of a movie. Officer Henderson was the first one out, this big guy with a buzz cut who looked like he'd seen it all. He asked me to show him where the body was, and I led him around back, my legs feeling like jelly. Megan stayed inside, too freaked out to move. When we got to the garden, the guy was still there, exactly how I'd left him, face down, blood soaking into the grass. Henderson crouched down, checked for a pulse, then shook his head at the other 2 officers. They started taping off the area, and I just stood there, feeling useless and sick. The house loomed behind us, its chipped paint and sagging gutters looking uglier than ever in the morning light. I kept wondering how long he'd been out there. Had he been bleeding out while we were inside? Scared of that knocking. Back inside, Henderson sat us down in the living room and started asking questions. Did we hear gunshots? See anyone suspicious? Megan's voice was all wobbly as she told him about the bloody guy at the kitchen window the night before, how he just stared at her. I chimed in about the knocking at 3 a.m., how it sounded like someone was trying to break the door down. Henderson scribbled it all in his little notebook, his face getting tighter with every word. He asked if we knew the guy, but how could we? We didn't even see his face. The other cops came in and out, talking in low voices about no footprints and no weapons, which just made it worse. The house felt different now, like it was watching us, soaking up every word we said. I couldn't stop picturing that blood, how it looked so fresh against the dead grass. After a while, the cops hauled the body away on a stretcher, covered with one of those black bags. I watched from the living room window as they loaded him into the coroner's van. And it hit me hard. This wasn't some nightmare I'd wake up from. Megan was still curled up on the couch, staring at the floor like she could see through it. Henderson stuck around, telling us they'd try to ID the guy, but he didn't sound hopeful. He asked if we'd noticed anything weird about the house lately, like break-ins or strange noises. I almost laughed. Everything about that place was weird. The way the floorboards creaked like someone was walking on them. The way the windows rattled even when there was no wind. I didn't say that though. I just shrugged and said no. But standing there, With the house pressing in around us, I started wondering if it was more than just old and creepy. The rest of the day was a blur. The cops left, promising to call if they figured anything out. But the quiet they left behind was suffocating. Megan wouldn't go near the kitchen, said she could still feel that guy's eyes on her through the window. I didn't blame her. Every time I passed by, I got this cold, prickly feeling up my spine, like someone was standing right behind me. The house didn't feel like ours anymore. It was too still, too heavy, like it was waiting for something. I kept replaying the night in my head. Megan's scream, the knocking, that bloody body in the yard. None of it added up. Why was he here? Why was he watching us? And the worst part, I couldn't shake the thought that he'd been out there all night, bleeding, while we hid inside like cowards. I wanted answers, but all I got was this gnawing dread that stuck with me. By late afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get out of the house, even just for a minute. I told Megan I was gonna check the mail, but really, I just needed air that didn't feel like it was choking me. Stepping outside, I noticed how quiet the street was. No kids playing, no cars, just the wind rustling through the trees. The house sat there behind me, its faded gray siding and crooked shutters, looking more like a face than ever like it was staring me down. I glanced back at the garden where the body had been. The grass was still flattened, a dark stain spreading out where his blood had soaked it. My stomach flipped, and I turned away fast, but I could feel the house watching me the whole way to the mailbox. It's hard to explain, but it was like the place knew something I didn't like. It was in on whatever happened. I grabbed the mail and bolted back inside, slamming the door harder than I meant to. Megan was still a wreck when I got back in. She'd moved to the recliner now, the blanket pulled up to her chin, and she wouldn't even look at me. I asked if she was okay, but she just shook her head and mumbled something about the window again. I didn't push her. She'd seen that guy up close, and I hadn't. I kept busy instead, pacing around, trying to ignore how every creak in the floor sounded like footsteps. The house was old, sure, but that day, it felt alive, like the walls were shifting just enough to mess with me. I stopped by the front door, where that knocking had come from, and ran my hand over the wood. It was cold, rough, and I swear I felt it vibrate under my fingers, like it remembered the pounding too. I yanked my hand back, heart racing, telling myself I was losing it. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. The rest of that day dragged on, and every little sound made us jump. The fridge humming, the wind rattling, the windows all felt wrong, like the house was playing with us. I kept catching myself staring at the kitchen doorway, picturing that bloody guy standing there, watching Megan cook. She wouldn't go near it, so I ended up making us sandwiches in the living room instead. The bread sticking in my throat because I was too on edge to eat. The house smelled different, too like damp wood, and something metallic I couldn't place. Maybe it was my imagination, but it reminded me of blood, and that just made my head spin worse. I kept thinking about how old the place was built in the 40s. Mom always said, and wondering what else had happened here before us. Had someone died in this house? Was that why it felt so heavy? I didn't have answers, just this growing pit in my gut. Night came too fast, and neither of us wanted to go upstairs to bed. We camped out in the living room instead, me on the couch and Megan in the recliner, the TV on low just to fill the silence. But even with the lights on, the house felt darker, like the shadows were thicker, pooling in the corners where the glow didn't reach. I kept glancing at the front door, waiting for that knocking to start again, my hands sweaty on the remote. Megan pulled the blanket over her head, and I could hear her breathing fast, like she was trying not to cry. The floor creaked upstairs, right above us, and we both froze. It wasn't the usual settling noise. This was slow, deliberate, like someone stepping across my room. I told myself it was nothing, but my heart was hammering so loud I could hear it in my ears. The house wasn't just old anymore, it was awake, and it was messing with us. I couldn't just sit there after that creak. I had to check it out, even though every part of me screamed to stay put. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it, and told Megan I'd be right back. She begged me not to go, her voice all high and panicky, but I couldn't let it slide. The stairs groaned under my weight as I climbed, each step feeling like I was walking into something I wouldn't come back from. The air up there was colder, heavier, and the hallway stretched out longer than it should have like. The house was bending itself around me. When I got to my room, the door was cracked open. Even though I'd shut it tight that morning, I pushed it wider, shining the light inside, and saw that loose floorboard lifted up, sticking out like someone had pried it loose. My throat went dry. There's no way that happened on its own. I stepped inside, my sneakers scuffing against the wood, and aimed the flashlight under the bed. Behind the dresser anywhere someone could hide. Nothing, just dust and shadows. But that creak had been real, and the air felt charged, like right before a storm. I bent down to fix the floorboard, and that's when I saw it scratched into the wood underneath, faint but clear. Help! My stomach lurched, and I dropped the board, the thud echoing way too loud in the quiet. Who wrote that? When I stumbled back, my light bouncing off the walls, and for a split second, I swear I saw something move in the corner a shape, tall and dark, gone when I blinked. I didn't wait to figure it out. Ty bolted downstairs, slamming the door shut behind me, my heart pounding like it was gonna burst. The house wasn't just creepy anymore, it was hiding something. I got back to the living room, out of breath, and Megan was already on her feet, wide-eyed, asking what happened. I didn't want to scare her more, but I couldn't lie. Told her about the floorboard and that scratched up help under it. Her face went even paler, and she started shaking her head saying we needed to leave, like right now. I wanted to agree, but where were we gonna go? Parents weren't back till tomorrow, and it was the middle of the night in a quiet suburb. No one was awake to help us. Plus, something about the house made me feel trapped, like if I tried to leave, it wouldn't let me. The walls seemed closer than before, the ceiling lower, and that metallic smell was stronger now, clinging to the back of my throat. I told Megan to sit tight, that it was probably nothing, but my voice cracked, and she knew I didn't believe it either. We stayed glued to the living room after that. Lights on full blast, TV blaring some infomercial about knives ironic, right? But it didn't matter. The house was louder than all of it. The creaks kept coming, not just from upstairs now, but from the kitchen, the hallway, even the basement door we never opened. It was like footsteps circling us, slow and heavy, testing where we'd break. I kept my eyes on the front door, that same door from the knocking, and noticed something I hadn't before: scratches on the inside, low near the bottom, like something had clawed at it. My skin went cold. Those weren't there yesterday. I'd swear on it. Megan saw me staring and asked what was wrong, but I just shook my head. I couldn't say it out loud. The house wasn't just awake anymore. It was pissed, and we were stuck in it. The clock hit 2 a.m., and I was losing it. Every sound was getting under my skin, and Megan was barely holding it together. She kept whispering that she could still see that bloody guy in her head, his eyes locked on her through the kitchen window. I tried to distract her, talking about dumb stuff like school or video games. But then the TV flickered just once, then twice, and went dead. The room got quiet, too quiet, and that's when we heard it. A low, raspy sound, like someone breathing, coming from the kitchen. My whole body locked up. I grabbed the flashlight and shone it toward the doorway, but the beam barely cut through the dark, like the shadows were swallowing it. Megan gripped my arm so tight it hurt, whispering, "Don't go, don't go," over and over. I didn't want to, but that sound, it wasn't the wind or the house settling. It was alive. I couldn't just sit there, so I forced myself up, dragging Megan with me because she wouldn't let go. We crept toward the kitchen, my flashlight shaking in my hand, the beam bouncing off the walls. The breathing got louder as we got closer, rough and wet, like someone was choking on their own spit. The kitchen was freezing, way colder than the rest of the house, and that metallic smell hit me like a punch. I swung the light around, and for a second, I saw something: a smear of red on the floor near the sink, dark and shiny, like fresh blood. I blinked, and it was gone, just the chipped linoleum staring back at me. Megan whimpered behind me, saying she saw it too, and I felt my knees go weak. The breathing stopped right then, like it knew we were there. And the silence was worse, like the house was holding its breath, waiting for us to make a move. I don't know how we didn't just run screaming right then, but we were too scared to even move. The kitchen felt like a trap. The windows were blacked out with the blinds, the air so thick it was hard to breathe, and that smear of blood I swore I saw kept flashing in my head. Megan was crying now, quiet little sobs, and I wanted to tell her it was okay, but my mouth wouldn't work. Then the lights flickered, not just the kitchen ones, but every light in the house, and off, on, off, like something was screwing with the power. Each flash lit up the room, and in one of those split seconds, I saw him, the bloody guy. He was standing by the sink, his back to us, shirt soaked red, head tilted weird like it was broken. I yelled, and the lights snapped back on full, but he was gone. Megan didn't see him, she was too busy staring at the floor, but she heard me, and that was enough to send her over the edge. She bolted for the living room, and I stumbled after her, my legs like lead. We collapsed on the couch, panting, and I kept the flashlight aimed at the kitchen doorway like it was a gun. Nothing came through, no bloody guy, no breathing, but the house wasn't done with us. The walls started creaking, not random like before, but rhythmic, like something was dragging itself along the other side. Upstairs, the floor groaned again, louder, heavier, like whatever was up there was pacing right above our heads. Megan grabbed my hand, her nails digging in, and whispered, "He's still here, he's still here." I didn't know if she meant the guy from the window or something else, but I felt it too, this weight, this presence, pressing down on us from every corner of the house. It wasn't just old or haunted, it was alive, and it hated us being there. I don't know how long we sat there, frozen, listening to the house groan and shift around us. It was like it was taunting us, those creaks, that dragging sound, all circling closer, but never showing itself. My flashlight battery was dying, the beam getting weaker, and I couldn't stop shaking. Megan kept muttering under her breath, make it stop, like a prayer. But it only got worse. The front door, the one that got pounded on, started rattling. Not like someone knocking, but like it was trying to shake itself open. I swung the light over, and the scratches I'd seen earlier were deeper now, longer, cutting into the wood like claws had been at it. My heart was in my throat. Hadn't imagined those marks changing. No way. The house was doing this, showing us it could move, change, fight. We were stuck in its grip, and it wasn't letting go. Then the basement door clicked, like the latch just popped on its own hand. I swear I heard something shuffle down there, deep in the dark, where we never went. Megan screamed, short and sharp, and I whipped the flashlight toward the hallway. The door was cracked open now, just an inch, and this cold, damp air rolled out, smelling like rot and metal. I couldn't see anything down the stairs, just black, thick, and endless, but I felt it watching us. The whole house went quiet for a second, dead still, and then the breathing started again. Louder, closer, right from that basement gap. It wasn't human, not anymore, more like a growl mixed with a wheeze, wet and angry. I grabbed Megan and pulled her off the couch, backing us toward the wall, because whatever was down there was coming up, and the house wanted us to know it. We pressed ourselves against the living room wall, nowhere left to go, and that basement door swung open wider, just slow enough to make my skin crawl. The breathing turned into this low, guttural sound, echoing up the stairs, and I could hear something dragging, heavy and uneven, like it was pulling itself up step by step. My flashlight was almost dead, flickering with every move, but I kept it aimed at the hallway. Megan was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe, and I was gripping her arm, trying to keep us together. Then I saw it, a shadow, tall and twisted, stretching across the wall from the basement stairs. It wasn't right, too long, too jagged, like it wasn't human anymore. The air got so cold my teeth hurt, and that metallic smell choked me, thick as blood. Whatever it was, it stopped just out of sight, and the house shook, walls, floor, everything like it was screaming with it. I don't know how I found my voice, but I yelled, "Get out! Leave us alone, dumb!" Yeah, but I was desperate. The shadow flinched, like it heard me, and then the lights blasted on every single one, brighter than they'd ever been, blinding us. The shaking stopped, the breathing cut off, and the basement door slammed shut so hard the frame cracked. Silence hit like a brick, and I mean nothing. No creaks, no wind, no TV static. Just me and Megan, panting against the wall, the flashlight dead in my hand. The house went back to normal, or as normal as it could be. Like it flipped a switch and decided we'd had enough. We didn't move for what felt like hours, waiting for it to start again, but it didn't. It just stopped, and that was almost worse, because I knew it could come back anytime. We didn't sleep after that, couldn't even if we wanted to. We stayed right there against the wall, huddled together, staring at the hallway like that shadow might come back any second. The lights stayed on, too bright, buzzing in this annoying way that drilled into my skull, but I wasn't about to turn them off. Megan stopped crying eventually, just went quiet, her face blank like she'd checked out. I kept running it all through my head, the bloody guy, the knocking that helped scratched upstairs, the thing in the basement. None of it made sense, but it all felt tied to the house, like it was the one pulling the strings. The air was still cold, still heavy, but the sounds were gone. No creaks, no breathing, just this empty hum. It was like the house was done playing, at least for now, and we were too wrecked to care. Morning came, and the sun barely made a dent through the curtains just this week. Gray light that made the place look even uglier. We didn't talk much. I think we were both scared saying it out loud would wake it up again. I checked the basement. Door it was shut tight. No scratches, no sign of anything, but I wasn't dumb enough to open it. The kitchen was normal too. No blood smears, no creepy vibes, just dirty dishes and that stupid pot of pasta we never ate. Megan wouldn't even step foot in there though, and I didn't push her. The house felt like it was holding its breath again, waiting for us to let our guard down. I kept looking out the window at the garden where that guy had been. The bloodstains still there, dark and real. Whatever happened, it wasn't over, not really, but it was quiet, and that's all I could handle right then. Mom and Dad got home that afternoon, and we tried to explain everything. Megan blurted out the whole mess about the bloody guy. The body, the cops, all of it. They freaked out, of course, calling the police again, asking why we didn't call them sooner. Henderson came back, went over it all with them, but he didn't have much to. The guy was still unidentified. No cause of death, no nothing. Mom kept hugging us, saying how sorry she was for leaving us alone, while Dad paced around, muttering about selling the house. I didn't tell them about the basement or the shadow eye. Couldn't even get the words out. The house was quiet the whole time they were there, like it was pretending to be normal, but I could still feel it watching us. That stain in the garden was gone by then, washed away by the rain or something, but I knew what I'd seen. It wasn't going anywhere in my head. Things stayed calm after that, weirdly calm. No more knocking, no creaks, no bloody guys showing up. Mom and Dad never moved us. Out said it was too expensive, but Megan slept in my room for weeks, too scared to be alone. I'd lie awake, listening for anything, but the house just sat there, silent and smug, like it had won. I still catch myself staring at the kitchen window sometimes, picturing that guy standing out there, bloody and still, or checking the basement door to make sure it's locked. Nothing's happened since that night, not a single weird thing. And that's what gets MIT just stopped, like it flipped off a switch and left us hanging. I don't get it. Why us? Why that night? The house knows, I bet, but it's not telling. It's just waiting, and I'm still here, stuck wondering when it'll start again. It's been years since that night, and I still live in this stupid house because I can't afford to leave. Mom and Dad are still here too, acting like nothing ever happened. Megan's long gone, bolted to some college across the country, and won't even visit. Not that I blame her. I walk by that kitchen window every day, and every time I see him in my head, that bloody guy, staring in, silent and still. The house hasn't done anything since. Not a single creak out of place. No shadows, no knocks, just normal. Boring, quiet. But I'm not dumb enough to trust it. I lock the doors twice every night, avoid the basement like it's cursed, and sometimes I catch myself holding my breath, waiting for that breathing to start again. It's like the house is mocking me, pretending it's over, but I know better. It's still here, waiting, and I can't shake the feeling that it's just picking its moment. I'm writing this because I need someone to hear it. I need to know if this sounds as insane as it feels. That guy, never identified. No one knew who he was, where he came from, or why he was bleeding in our yard. The cops gave up, said it was a fluke, but I know it wasn't. The knocking, the shadow, that help scratched upstairs, all stopped that night, like someone hit pause and it's never started back up. No explanation, no reason, just gone. I still don't get why it was our house. Why us? And the worst part is, I'll probably never know. It's quiet now, yeah, but it's the kind of quiet that keeps me up at night, wondering when it'll decide to finish what it started. Until then, I'm just stuck here, waiting for the house to make its move or not. That's the scariest thing. It's up to it, not me.